Welcome to Trader Gang Money Matters with David Sikhosana. Today I'm going to be discussing tax. I'm going to be discussing also why Africa is still a great continent and it's still, we're at our peak when it comes to emerging markets. Like we literally have to get from this step where everything is now to the next step and what it takes for us to get there. Some of the questions that one can easily have is understanding money, right? In my time value of money book, I talk about how, with tax, for example, how most people seem to think that, buying a house is the best thing until they found out that if you buy a house and you put it on your name, it becomes a huge challenge when or after you pass. The reason why I say this is because once you have passed, the state has the right to deeply get into your assets, through an executor who, let's say, for example, if you have a will, then once you're gone, in order for the court to split whatever you left according to what you said in your will, or if you don't have a will, to split it evenly, to kids that you may have had, to your spouse, to family, to everyone. They literally freeze up everything. And this means that the assets that you have under your name can be literally frozen. And this means until they get unfrozen, which takes a period about, 1 year to 3 years, no one can have access to these assets. Okay, so that means if your kids are living in your house and there comes a time when you realize that, or when not you, but when the court realizes that you have debts and all of those things, you're going to freeze up all the assets and try to free up as much cash as possible. And in that time, no one is allowed to stay in your house, for example. So this can be a challenge, because then that would mean your family would be left stranded and they would have to move out of the house. And if you only have one house, then it's another challenge. So there's different ways around this. Okay, you can buy a house under your name. You can buy a house through a trust, which is what most wealthy people do. Actually, they create trusts and then they buy their properties, they buy their cars, they buy everything through the trust. It's more expensive in a sense of, tax-wise. It's very expensive, but it's worth it, because then cash can be freed up at any moment and you won't lose the assets. Okay, and then there's another way also, which is buying it through a company. You don't want to buy it through a company because, as soon as your assets accumulate and they become more, the more tax you're going to pay. So the whole point is to reduce tax, okay? And they're going to charge you all kind of tax if you buy through the company. And obviously, if let's say you're not the only director in the company, then it becomes even more a challenge. Even if you are, because once you're gone, your company goes with you if you're the only director in those companies. So these are things that you need to think about as far as tax is involved in trying to buy property and trying to buy different assets. Okay, because if, like I said, I'm in favor of the trust one, because the trust can pay everything else. The trust can withdraw money according to what the will says, but it won't affect your children. It won't affect your family even if you pass. Okay, so also I feel like leadership in terms of optimism has truly worked for me personally, because I feel like you can't be pessimistic and still hope for things to work out in the end. That's not how it works. You have to be optimistic about the future, and that's when I'd like to believe you attract the positive things that the future gives you. Okay, so what I'm saying is, if a company is run in a very goal-driven, target-driven, optimistic, from an optimistic leadership point of view, then it's easy for that company to grow. But you're going to hinder your growth if everything that you try to attempt to do, then you're just going to be pessimistic about it. So this is truly things. I know South Africa is going through a lot right now. I know that everything that's happening is truly heart-shattering. And there seems to be more and more poverty as the time goes. But we're still 10 times better than most countries, actually. If you think about it, we're still... And our growth as compared to, let's say, pre-1994 has been truly something extraordinary. Okay, and even the companies, the private companies, what the private sector is doing as far as contributing to the economic growth has truly evolved. It has truly transcended since, pre-1994. We cannot avoid that. As much as we like to blame, the government and so forth, they are partly to blame, don't get me wrong, but the private sector has done so much. Like entrepreneurs have done so much to not only contribute towards unemployment, but basically growing the whole GDP as a whole. So it's very easy to see what's happening now and reach a conclusion of saying everything is just getting destroyed, but that's not entirely true. That's why I'm saying you have to break down everything to its fundamental point and see the 20 years ago where South Africa was versus now where we are now. Okay. Yeah, regardless of what the mood is, what the, being downgraded to junk status and all of that. But in Africa as a whole, South Africa is one of the countries that are very rich in everything. We just have to find a way to support each other and stick together and try to let income or money generate more money within the country. Okay, I believe that if we can do that, then there's definitely hope. There's definitely light at the end of the day. So economically, I think we'll be okay. Things are not as bad as they seem, but if there was ever any time when not only do you have to learn about new skills, but you have to also create an alternative income if you're working, and if you're not working, to realize that you actually have to start your own company, which is your legal right. You can literally open a company. It's going to be very difficult because, a company needs resources like a child. You need to feed it. You need to, constantly spend money in order to grow it, but eventually it grows. Okay, so all the sacrifices, all the hard work does not go to nothing. It literally grows. So again, it can contribute to unemployment, it can contribute to, GDP and all of that. Now, as far as budgets and so forth, government can only do so much. I know we like to hold accountable different people or different governmental sectors because we want them to help us grow, but individually there's things that we're already doing that are already making us grow. It's just that we're not growing at the pace that we want to. I'll publish an article about this, the African continent and innovation, but I truly believe that the whole reason why the entire world is looking at Africa, not only in terms of artistic arts or artwork, in terms of music and all of that, but also in terms of business. That's why you constantly have to put money in South Africa, because the only way a country or a continent grows is if you pump money into it. And look at how South Africa is doing compared to other Western African countries or Northern African countries. But that's not the point. The point is not to compare our country versus Nigeria, for example. The point is we need to find a way to literally get investors to come and invest here, and of course be rid of corruption, because corruption is the one thing that kills hope that investors have when they're thinking of investing in South Africa. So obviously, but in due time, processes are in place, I believe, that will truly, But I think more work needs to be done for small business, for entrepreneurs, than any other form of economic growth. Because once you stabilize that sector, then everything just shoots up from there. I think more and more entrepreneurs are even realizing now, some of the most successful minds of South Africa are actually realizing that listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange was probably not a good idea. Because most of the companies now, especially African-owned companies, the owners are delisting, or the share price becomes so less to nothing that they don't have a choice but to delist or to buy more of the shares that they have in their company. So basically, a public company can be broken down, and let's say if the ownership of the public company lies on, firstly, let's say I own 5% of my company that's listed. The other 5% is owned by maybe a company in the financial sector, and another 5% is owned by the government, another 5%, like that. But they're realizing more and more that it's not like in the US, right? Like what happened with Tesla now, with Elon, and the fact that his net worth is literally past Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, which is, his Elon Musk's net worth now, as we speak, is standing at about $90 billion. And the company is releasing more and more work. They're working on, the Model Y now. They're doing a lot of exciting things, which is moving the stock price. And whenever Elon says something that's innovative, it moves the stock price. But I think in South Africa, we're not supposed to rely on that basis. We're not supposed to look at a share price. But we cannot acknowledge the fact that the country needs to invest in people. That's why I'm saying we can't run it as a company. The minute when we start running it as a company, then we only care about the deadline. I'm not saying all the companies care about the deadline more than they care about their customers, but I know some that do. In my companies, I would put the client first, but other people do. Capitalism, it does the opposite. And obviously, like I always say, with capitalism, it's a very strong pursuit, because you can eliminate the worst of it, but in some form, in some way or another, you deal with capitalism. So anyway, that's what I'm saying. Like, if government can invest in small business, in entrepreneurs, in, building that infrastructure, or if the entrepreneur can build their own infrastructure, which is difficult to do, but it has to be done, then our understanding of money can change. And this is what I talk about in my book, okay? About how money is viewed and how it can be used and what's the fundamental purpose of it. So send me your opinions, send me your questions, and let me know if there's anything that you want me to answer as far as tax, as far as innovation, and as far as investments in Africa. But yeah, I look forward to answering those questions in the next podcast.